Hi, welcome to the first episode of Haunted American Road Trip. My name is Derek Johnson. I will be your host. Just for a little bit of backstory, I started this podcast because I was bored that I wasn't able to go anywhere during the pandemic, and I wanted to go to haunted places. So I decided to make a podcast about essentially the haunted places we could all go to. Each episode will cover its own specific state. Today, we are doing my home state, the state of Massachusetts. And with that, let's get started. So, since it is my home state, we'll start our trip in my hometown, Littleton. It's a relatively small town in Middlesex County that first was started to be settled in 1686, if I remember correctly. It has recently started to see some urbanized development with projects like the Point. But growing up, I have found many residents were unfamiliar with some of the true history of the town. It did begin as a praying native village for Native Americans that had converted to Christianity. Unfortunately, they were forcibly removed during King Philip's War, and the town soon became home to English colonists who had won the war. While many of us are familiar with Tituba and the Salem witch trials that were sparked by the accusations of her master's daughter and other relatives, few are aware that Littleton actually had its own brush with witchcraft. It actually began in the year of 1720 for us. There was a woman named Abigail Dudley. She was 37 years old and happily settled into her third marriage with Samuel Dudley. He was the town's first town clerk, and he was a selectman. With him, Abigail had 11 children and a 12th from her previous marriage. Unfortunately, her idyllic colonial life was not to last. Another family, the Blanchards, were well known and well respected in the area. Joseph and Elizabeth Blanchard had 3 daughters at the time, Elizabeth, Joanne, and Mary. One day, when Abigail passed by the children, they began to have violent fits. Before long, this happened whenever she would pass the children in public. The townspeople began to speculate, but town government and religious leaders didn't want to jump to conclusions. The local reverend recommended the parents separate the girls for a little bit, but after Joseph and Elizabeth refused, eventually things got bad enough to the point where the town was actually beginning to brace themselves for an official accusation of witchcraft. It was then revealed, however, that Abigail was pregnant with her 13th child. Even if formally accused, she could not be brought to trial until after the baby was born and no longer needed her to nurse. Unfortunately, Abigail never lived long enough to be formally accused. Due to the stress of childbirth and possibly the impending trial of witchcraft, she actually died giving birth to her 13th child, Roger Dudley. Lucky 13. Members of the town government actually breathed a sigh of relief at having avoided what could have become a very public and very ugly trial. The Blanchard family would later move to Medford, and with their property was later ceded by the nearby town of Boxborough. Abigail was buried in a grave that is actually now lost to our records. It's speculated it's somewhere on the Acton-Boxborough border, but we don't actually know where it is. And chances are there's actually like residential dwellings on it, so I can only imagine how haunted those little houses are right now.